Eric the Turf Teacher Jones. Oh, yeah! Teaching you life lessons, business strategies, and leadership.
Let's grow together.
If you're just joining us in the chat box, go ahead and type in your name and your license number. That'll save us time, and I won't have to go through calling everybody's name, and it shows that you're interactive in the chat box. If you have any questions, again, just ask. We're all here to talk. Grab the beer, grab a glass of wine. Most of y'all get to do that. I can't do that.
Got a beer. You have a beer? Got a beer?
All right. So there's Francisco, Kyle, Scott. Go ahead and type in your names in the chat box. I'm promoting you guys to panelists. It may take just a few seconds for you to get into that. Kelly, you have your hand up. Kelly, I guess you're good. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with label calculations. Lengthy slide deck, but we'll get through it. And then there's some problems towards the end that we're going to look at. And let's look at our objectives. Like I said, guys, if you have any questions, just type it in the chat box or just unmute your mic, ask me. This hour goes by very, very fast, especially when we're interactive. But let's have some fun. We're going to talk about the difference between the label and the labeling. One is a part of the other, and the other is not a part of the other. So we'll talk about that. We'll understand the difference between federal EPA and special local needs and emergency exemptions. We'll find brand, chemical, and common names on the label, and then we'll identify active ingredient percentage in a pesticide formulation. And then we'll understand the wording used on labels and its meaning, whether it's danger, poison, danger, warning, or caution. We'll look at an MSDS sheet and the information that's on that. And we will understand calibration of equipment. Now, here's always a question I like to start with. When should we calibrate our equipment?
Every time you spray.
Every time we spray. Now, that means every single day, right?
Yeah.
and you're laughing because that's what's supposed to happen, right? Does it actually happen?
No.
It doesn't. But if you go back and you look in our old books, applying pesticides correctly, and now the new manual, the core manual, what does the Department of Ag recommend when it comes to calibration? Yes, we're supposed to do it every single morning before we leave the shop. But technically, when else are we supposed to do it? From job site to job site. Ain't gonna happen, is it? No way. But tell me, is there an instance when we should actually recalibrate in between job sites? Give me a prime example that we would really mess ourselves up if we did not calibrate. Now, if you're on the coast, you're probably not gonna have to worry about it because everything is. If you're in the mountains, you're probably not gonna have to worry about it because everything's like that. What about here in the central Piedmont area? What do we typically have when it comes to our sites that we take care of?
Rolling hills.
Do what, Kelly? We got the rolling hills, and we've got some properties that are relatively flat, and we may have a neighborhood that has some steep hills in it. And so I'm definitely thinking of a site, a residential neighborhood that we're in that has a lot of steep yards, but up the road, we're doing a shopping center that is 100% flat. So I definitely don't want to apply our chemicals on the same day unless I am recalibrating from the commercial site to the residential site. What do you think that is a problem when we're moving from site to site like that has different slopes? What's happening with our calibration?
Ground speed.
Ground speed, the major thing. Flat ground, we're hauling butt. We get on those hills, it might, we're slowing a little bit. So those are some definite times that we may need to recalibrate. What about as the season progresses? Today was a beautiful day. I mean, we are so lucky to be, green industry pros and to work outside in a beautiful sunny day, wind blowing, just perfect day. But as the season progresses, what do you think is going to happen when it gets, end of May, in the 1st of June? The temperatures are going to go up. So when might be another time we want to calibrate or recalibrate throughout the day?
When it's hot, we slow down.
We slow down, don't we? So as that day progresses, early morning, we're geared up, we're fired up. The temperatures are rising. It gets closer to lunch. We eat a heavy lunch. At 2 o'clock, it's just the heat is unbearable. We're just dragging. So our speed slows down. So when our speed slows down, what happens to our application rate?
It's heavier.
It's heavier, goes up. And so we're wasting product. We're putting out too much product when we're slowing down. So either we need to kind of halt operations when it gets a certain degree, or maybe not even do it after lunch and, have the guys do something else, or you probably need to recalibrate. So those are some good stuff to look at. We'll actually look at a application area size. We'll determine some app rates, and then we'll determine the amount of pesticide carrier and concentrate to be used. And then we'll understand nozzles, their speed and pressure, and how they affect calibration. And so with the label and labeling, I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody that way because I hear myself echoing in the background. Let's see. Yep, like a major echo. So is everybody good, clear, and hear me? Just give me a thumbs up. All right, good deal. So with the label and the labeling, the label is basically everything that is printed on our containers, whether it's the fertilized bag, whether it's the 2.5 gallon jug of Roundup that we've got, it's everything on that container. The labeling can be anything, including the label itself and any brochures, any other reference materials that we can get from the manufacturer or our sales rep. We go into Site One, we go into the Green Resource, wherever we're buying our products, they can give us all kinds of literature on that product, or it's stuff that we've downloaded from the internet. That is considered our labeling. Now, who do you think might be the best at finding out information about the products that we buy?
Sales rep.
The sales rep, exactly. And why is that, Mr. Prince?
He knows everything about it, and that's who we rely on maintaining golf courses and commercial landscape that we do.
Yes.
I mean,
everything's up here. They see it every single day. And they're not only talking to us, Mr. Prince, who else are they talking to?
everybody else.
And they're like, hey, this rate was a little low, or this rate's too much. This is what we're experiencing, Mr. or Miss Salesman behind the counter. And they're passing that information along to us. So I think they're the unsung heroes in lawn care is our sales rep. We need to use them more often. Pick up the phone, or when you go there, ask several questions. They know the information. With EPA approval, guys, it takes a minimum of 6 years to receive approved labeling. So you're this new chemist, you're in business, you're out of grad school, and you're like, I've got this, I'm going to figure this out, how to get rid of this weed. Well, it's going to take you 6 years from the EPA to get that labeling. They've got to determine the level of toxicity and if the pesticide has any residual harmful effects in our environment. And they're going to list these environmental hazards and the precautionary statement. So you come up with something new, just get ready to wait. Here we're looking at Rondo. Of course, this is a fictitious label, but it is glyphosate, 41%, just like all glyphosates. And we see the name, we see the trade name, we see the EPA registration number, we see those precautionary statements, we see the other ingredients, which are, hardly ever listed. They just tell us the percentage. And then we're always going to see hazardous to humans, domestic animals, and of course, to keep out of reach of children. With your class and registration, this is based on whether it is restricted or general use. Restricted, what do you got to have to purchase a restricted use pesticide?
License.
You got to have that little green card, and your dealer is going to ask you for that card. They're going to want to see it. They're going to have to log it in their book because they have to maintain records when they sell restricted use pesticides. And luckily, I know it's probably different in agriculture. It's different in golf course, but pretty much everything that we put out, in the lawn care side of the house, they're not restricted. We're not having to, we're just lucky enough that we don't have to deal with some of the harsher, chemicals that the farmers do. And of course on the golf course. So we're lucky with that, but we still need our license to put it out, but you definitely got to show that license to get the restrict. Can a homeowner buy a restricted use pesticide to put on their own property? They can't. They're only going to be able to buy general use. And so basically restricted use is going to be sold at our dealers. General use, they're going to pick up at the big box stores. But with this class registration, it's based on the application, how it's loaded, how it's mixed, how it's transported, how it's stored, how we handle it after we break the seal, how the equipment is cared for, and then of course, container disposal. But that's how the EPA gives its registration. Here in North Carolina, we do have some pesticides that are exempt from EPA registration. They don't really have any label requirements, but we do have to register them with the state of North Carolina. Those are considered minimum risk pesticides, and we typically don't use much of those in lawn care. With standard registration, you as the certified pesticide applicator, license holder, are responsible for only applying pesticides registered with the EPA. Now, listen to that statement. We are only responsible for putting out pesticides that are registered. Where in the world can we even get a pesticide that's not registered with the EPA? You can't buy them, but do they exist? Think about it. How many of y'all grew up on a farm? In Grandpa's shop, did you ever see pesticides in a glass container? They sold pesticides in glass bottles back in the day, right? The label's done gone. It's sitting up on the shelf. Now, my dad, he could still walk in there and open it up and smell it and tell you exactly what it is. But a lot of these people, they find this stuff, and guess what they're doing? They're spraying it. No. That's a no. And so I asked an ag agent that one time, I'm like, where in the world are people getting pesticides that aren't registered? He said, and it told me the exact thing. He said, you grew up on a farm. He said, remember that stuff you found in the barn? He said, people are putting it out. He said, you can't do it. And it's already lost its registration. It's so old. So these registrations have to get renewed. So a lot of that stuff going on. Special local needs. This allows the states to expand the use of certain pesticides for use for targets not specifically listed on the label. So, some new insect or new disease is attacking a crop or whatever, they can actually use a pesticide that's not, really designed for that, but they know it'll get it. But they got to get that special local needs registration. Emergency exemptions. This is usually based on public health emergencies, and this will allow the use of a pesticide for a non-registered use. I can't think of any time one of these was used. And I know a lot of the ag agents, I always ask them that. I'm like, give us an example in your career. And they're like, well, we haven't had to deal with it. So those are far few in between. But remember, the label is the law. And we don't read enough about our pesticides. Now, call me a nerd or whatever, but I like getting out labels and reading them when I do have a spare moment. I think it's just like our plant material, guys. We can recognize a plant, but we can't name it right off the bat. We're like, it's on the tip of our tongue. We can't say it. If you don't use your plants, you're going to lose their names. You're not going to remember what they are. Same thing with pesticides. We need to reread these labels because a lot of the chemicals we may only be spraying one time of year, and we need to freshen up on them, the following year when it's time to put those out again. But this label, it is a legal contract between you and the manufacturer on how to put it out, how to store it, how to mix it, and how to dispose of the containers. So that's why it is law, because it is the legal contract between you and the manufacturer. And we got to follow it. And just think about this. If you ever get pulled over by one of the inspectors and you start quoting stuff off the label because you read it the night before and it's fresh on your mind, they're going to know what you're talking about. And they're less likely to stand there for an hour going through all of your stuff. If they say, hey, what are you spraying? And you just like, bam, 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 say it all and tell them all the safety precautions and stuff. They're going to, hey, you know what you're talking about? We're good to go. You've got your license. Here we're looking at, Roundup. This is the trade name or the brand name. And everybody freaks out about Roundup. But do they freak out about the other glyphosate products? They only hear Roundup and they're like, oh my gosh, we can't have you spraying this on our yard. We have clients that tell us not to spray Roundup. And we're having clients tell us they don't want any applications on their property. They'd much rather have us, pull weeds by hand. They'd rather use some organic stuff, which costs a lot more. There is the organic stuff. You just got to use it a whole lot more. But people are getting very, very scared of Roundup, and they don't want to see you walking around with a backpack sprayer on your backs. So I think times are changing for us when it comes to that. But with this trade or brand name, it's used in advertisement. It indicates usually the formulation and active ingredient. Example, nematodes 3E. And if you guys have ever taken the pesticide exam here in North Carolina, it was on that exam when I took it in '97, and it was on it again when I took it 3 years ago. I wanted to take it and just see if it had changed, and it had not changed. Nematodes 3E was an example that was on the test that we had to answer questions about the label. But this name, it indicates that there's 3 pounds active ingredient of an emulsifiable concentrate. E means the emulsifiable concentrate, and sometimes you'll see it EC. But nematodes is 3. Don't choose your pesticide based on the trade or brand name because they can be similar to other products. Of course, you would want to buy that generic pesticide if you can, because it's going to be a little bit cheaper. Just like with our medications that we use, we try to get the generic. With your pesticide type and formulation, it's listed on the front of the label and contains a short statement. Example, herbicide for control of woody brush and weeds, just like here on the Rondo herbicide. Here we see an insecticide. And it is in a suspension concentrate. So, and we see that actually in the name, the 350 SC right here. Hopefully you guys, can you see my mouse moving? Maybe you can't. Let's see. I know I've got these little pins. All right, there we go. Laser pointer right about, you can see that, can't you? Cool. But there is the SC for the suspension concentrate. Karate. Restricted use pesticides. Here again, another insecticide. And I would hate to be killed by an insecticide. because the way they kill these insects, they literally sometimes just shake themselves to death. They die of exhaustion. So bad way to go. With your ingredient statement, the active ingredient is the chemical in the pesticide formulation that destroys the pest or performs the desired function. You know, glyphosate is in Roundup. That is the active ingredient. The inert ingredient is not always named, but the label will always show the percentage. And with your chemical name, identifies the structure of the pesticide and chemical components. Now, usually that chemical name is very long, hard to pronounce. And so sometimes the EPA will allow a common name to be posted on the label, but they have to approve of it. The common name is a shorter name just because that chemical name is very, very complex. And it will take you, 30 seconds to say the name of it. With EPA registration numbers, they appear on all pesticide labels. Here we have the EPA registration number right here. And then we have the EPA establishment number. Now, why do you think we want to have an establishment number and a registration number on the label? What is that used for? So let's say we purchase a 2.5 gallon jug of a certain pesticide and we use it and it just does what it's supposed to do, or it kills the entire crop or whatever.
For like a recall or where they
Yeah.
made it and maybe they did something to it differently.
Yes. Perfect. 100% right. That way they can stop the manufacturing of it. They can recall all the products that came from that facility. They can track it real quick. They can stop the sale of it really, really fast. Here are our signal words. Danger, poison, always going to be in red, and it's also going to be there in Spanish. Danger, purple, warning, orange, and then caution, yellow. And then luckily, like I said, a lot of the stuff that we apply as lawn care technicians, a lot of them are caution. We're not having to worry about some of this crazy stuff. With danger poison, always the skull and crossbones, and then highly toxic entering the body in any way, whether we breathe it, whether we get it on our skin and our eyes, whether we get it in our mouth, just the nasty stuff. There's only been one time in my career, and this was, early on, that I had to suit up like I was going into a hospital with COVID patients, where we had to have the Tyvek suit, the respirator, the whole 9 yards. We were treating a huge bank of junipers. I can't even remember what the pesticide was. I was just out of college doing it. And I was granularly applying this stuff, but the dust was so bad from it that we couldn't breathe it in. With warning, moderately toxic if entering through the mouth, skin, or inhaling it. It does cause moderate eye and skin irritation. Caution, slightly toxic if entering through the mouth, skin, or inhalation, slight eye or skin irritation. Now, when we're applying these pesticides and we're wearing our PPE and, we've got our gloves on and stuff, of course, we need to wash our hands every time we take a sip of water, if we're taking our break and we're eating our sandwich at lunch. But when are some other times we need to wash our hands? Smoking, Lindsay there, yep. What about when you go to the latrine? Yep. It's getting hot, guys. The growing area, the armpits, anywhere that's hot and where we sweat more, we're going to have 100% absorption of the pesticide. So a little bit of residue on our hands, and we use the restroom. Very dangerous doing that. We need to wash our hands before we use the bathroom and after using the bathroom. With your statement of first aid and treatment, in case of contact with skin, in case of contact with eyes, in case of inhalation, do this. Now, if one of your colleagues or one of your employees goes down with a pesticide situation, where we're having to call EMS or we're having to transport them to the emergency room, what's one thing we need to take with us?
Record keeping of what you sprayed.
Yeah, the label. Grab that label. And if you ain't got the label, it's on the jug, grab that jug. But that's why I like keeping extra copies of this in like a 3-ring binder in the truck. We can grab that 3-ring binder, and the doctor's going to want to see what we were actually spraying. Now, I know it's getting hot. It's getting warm. A lot of the symptoms of a pesticide exposure resemble what?
Heat stroke.
Exhaustion.
Heat exhaustion, heat stroke, and what's another big one?
Dehydration.
Yeah. But think about the old ticker.
Oh, heart attack.
attacks. They have trouble breathing. They're having chest pains. It's very, very symptomatic, pesticide exposure to an MI or a heart attack. So it's good to know, the health, the kind of the conditions, if your employees have had heart conditions in the past, you may need to know that when they're actually spraying these pesticides. With your precautionary statements, these precautions are to be followed when using the chemical. It may indicate which entry route, mouth, skin, or inhalation in which should be especially protected. And then the actions taken to avoid acute, delayed, or allergic reactions. Acute, happen like very, very quickly. Delayed, it can happen 2 or 3 days later, or it could even happen years later. We see these commercials at night about using certain chemicals, right? Lawyers are out there saying if you've been exposed to this pesticide or you've used this pesticide, it may start causing certain, cancers. And then allergic reactions is something that can kill you very, very quickly with the exposure. EpiPen is what you need to have. EMS on the way. But always protect yourself. Now, I see so many cool people in the green industry that don't want to wear this stuff. I see individuals spraying, they've got a backpack on and they're in shorts and flip-flops. See it all the time, especially guys at the beach. Mr. Prince, I'm probably sure, is one of them, man. He wants to keep the tan going. And, he's out there with that backpack. And if they put a little bit of blue tracker dye in there it'll be all over he'll look like a Smurf.
Our inspectors down here, if they pull up and they're in spraying even glyphosate down here in the beds, if they're not wearing long pants, they will call you immediately and produce a fine or pull them off.
Good
In the coastal area. You got to have at least long pants spray.
Yep. And what are we seeing? What are we seeing with the inspectors out here? We're starting to see some of the old guys that let that slide. They're retiring, and we're getting new young blood as inspectors, and they're gung ho about this stuff. And so, we here in, my area, there's some Alabama, University of Auburn students, graduates up here working as ag agents and inspectors. So they're hot to trot when it comes to, getting the people for the citations they need to be, gotten for. But always wear your PPE, read the label. And guys, it's okay to go a little bit overboard. I admit when I was young and into it, I didn't want to wear the stuff. I didn't want to at all. Now I wouldn't even think about making an application without wearing the stuff. As you get older, you see what this stuff can do, and you're just trying to protect, what time you have. But minimal, like you said, long pants, waterproof shoes. I wear long sleeves every day. I mean, I just keeping the sun off of my skin. I feel cooler. I don't like that farmer's tan. So we always wear long sleeve shirts. And then iPro, you got to have the goggles on. And a lot of inspectors, I've asked the ag agents before, are we okay wearing sunglasses? And he's like, yes, with most style of sunglasses, we're going to let that slide because they're bigger and they wrap around the face. They're the little bitty round glasses. Of course not. But, most people in the green industry are wearing, UVEX style shades like the guy here in the cartoon pic, and it, wraps around the face and covers, a bigger portion of the face and definitely 100% of the eyes. You're going to have environmental hazards and general environmental statements. These are going to be warnings on the label to prevent runoff and drift. They're going to talk about the physical and chemical hazards, whether or not it's flammable or corrosive. And this is information especially needed when storing the pesticides. And, we're supposed to keep 3 copies of our pesticide inventory, one in our office, one in the pesticide storage facility itself. And who needs to get the other list of our chemicals on site? Your local EMS and fire department. They need to know exactly what's in your storage facility. If you were to have a fire, we don't want those brave young men and women going in there and not knowing what's burning. So there may be a time where they just like, hey, we got to let it burn because of the chemicals that are in there. Directions for use. This section specifically details how to use, store, and dispose of the pesticides. And again, the label is the law. You've got to follow it to the T. With storage and disposal, general instructions for the storage and disposal of the chemical and the container. It may be under headings that are labeled important, note, or general instructions. And again, so that means we've got to turn the pages on this label, guys. And the fine prints are so small, we're going to need these guys sometimes. I never thought I'd need reading glasses, but, here lately, I can't even read a text message. So I know I'm not going to be able to read a pesticide label without them. We're going to have the name and address of the manufacturer down here, US Ag LLC, Luthersville, Georgia. It's got the phone number. It's got their website. The net content, how much product is in the container, whether it's dry or wet. If it's dry, it's going to be listed in pounds or ounces. If it's wet, they're going to list it in gallons, quarts, or pints. And with the agricultural use requirements, only on pesticides covered by the EPA Worker Protection Standard, or the WPS. And this is only a couple pages in the APC old manual and our new core manual that we see, but it protects agricultural workers. And the reason being is that there were large corporate farms that were making applications to the fields and sending the workers in there immediately. And the workers were getting sick. They had some that passed away, unfortunately. So the federal government had to step in and create this worker protection standard. And so they have, time limits that they can't go into the field after certain applications. Do what?
Period of reentry, basically.
Yes, exactly. And if the label says that the workers have to have eye pro on or got some type of eye protection, what's another thing that they have to, what does the corporate farm have to have on site?
Goggles.
Eye wash. They got to have an emergency eye wash station, and they do make the portable ones. We had them in the Army. They'd be out in the field all the time. You step on them and, they could flush your eyes out. Here we have a label. It is restricted use. It's always listed there in big, bold letters. We have our trade name, Vaporize, and the formulation is in the trade name, Vaporize WP, meaning wettable powder. Very common formulation used in lawn care. Our mode of action, our active ingredients. We've got Vaporin, and then right here is that chemical name, 2-vaporizin N-dihydrogen monoxide. So that one is not so bad to say, but it's at 12%, and our other inert ingredients are at 88%. Our net contents, it's a 5-pound container. There's our EPA registration number and the EPA establishment number. Here's the manufacturer. The signal word is caution. And, you know, most people will always think that a restricted use pesticide is going to be danger, you know, or, you know, one of the higher signal words. But this is a restricted use, you know, pesticide, and it's only caution. We've got, you know, keep out of reach of children, and our what ifs, you know, if swallowed, in the eyes, or inhaled. Our precautionary statements are directions for use and how to store and dispose of it.
Hell no, you're not.
And let's see.
I do want to get a 7-foot long.
No.
Just kidding. I'm not going to get a 7-foot long. My friend has a 7-foot long.
All right, got everybody muted. So if you need to say something, you just unmute your mic again. With your MSDS sheets, your material safety data sheets, again, when I purchase our pesticides, I like asking our dealer, you know, hey, do you got an MSDS sheet? If they don't have one readily available, I'm going to print one off the internet. We used to be required to keep these in the vehicles. Now they're not so much worried about that as long as you have a good, clean copy of your label. But with the MSDS sheets, it's just good information to have. It's almost like it's a short version of the label with all the important information, like the product ID, the fire and explosion hazards, the physical and chemical properties, the toxicological information and human health data, the PPE that's required, and any additional information that the manufacturer thinks is good to be on there. So we need to read that as much as we do the label. Our directions for use: if the range is stated, use the least possible amount to achieve the goal. We want to do that. We can ask, you know, pesticide consultants, believe it or not, that is actually a license that we can get. There's certain criteria to meet for that. Industry organizations, you know, like the Turfgrass Council of North Carolina, Cooperative Extension, university specialists, and even pesticide dealers. I actually took a class this morning myself and got some pesticide credits, and good topics. You know, the ag agent down in Davidson County, super cool guy. And, you know, we learned about how to treat some of these invasives. So it was a cool class. But these guys are fresh out of college. They're keeping up with their continuing education, and they're bringing all this new information, you know, to Cooperative Extension. And then, you know, here in North Carolina, we have NC State and North Carolina A&T State University that's always doing research, and we can get information there. But I think most importantly is the pesticide dealers. That guy or gal behind the counter that's selling these products every single day. With our application rates, you know, this can be stated on the label in how much per area or how much pesticide per mixture or in percentage. Your adjuvants are chemicals used to improve the effectiveness or safety and are often added to the pesticide mixture. And we're going to see things like this on the label. You know, we're going to see like 5 gallons per acre, 5 pints active ingredient per acre, 5 tablespoons per gallon, half a pound active ingredient per 500 gallons, or 0.5% by volume or by weight. So we've got to do some math, guys, when we're calibrating our equipment and we set it up for that. Next thing we got to do is calculate how much. Now, let me ask this question for you guys. Do you think it's more detrimental to our checkbooks to apply too little of a pesticide or too much of a pesticide?
Both.
Yes, that is the correct answer. Now, both of y'all kind of give me examples of why both would be detrimental.
Too little, you'll have to go back and retreat, and too much, you're just wasting chemical.
Yep, exactly. Miss Smith ain't going to stand for it if she's paid you to do an application and she still has that pest, right? She's going to be calling you back. And your technician's going to be mad at you because they got to go back anyway. So what are they going to do when they go there? They're going to throw extra in there. They're going to make sure they kill it this time. And it's just hurting the bottom line. And they're also they're also committing a crime. Why is that?
Over applying.
They're over applying. They're putting way too much out. When mixing, loading, and calibrating, calibrate your sprayer using only water. Some pesticides are ready to use and are applied until they create runoff, like aerosols, baits, foggers, dusters, and collars. Other RTUs need to be loaded into an applicator that requires application, including most granular dust and in some liquid form. Now, which piece of equipment that we use in lawn care gets out of calibration the quickest?
Backpack sprayer.
Why is that?
Cause the swath distance may vary.
That's true. That's true. Well, what's another one that really is probably more important to check the calibration than that backpack? It's still another handheld device.
Hand pump sprayer.
Well,
Push spreader.
this push spreader.
Oh, right.
Push
yeah.
spreader. And think about it, because it's one, how we transport it. Most of us put it like in a receiver hitch thing, but every time we hit a speed bump, we hit a pothole, we go over railroad tracks, and that thing's bouncing on the back of the tailgate, it's going to get out of calibration the quickest. And then, yes, your backpack sprayer, which is two of my favorite pieces of equipment, guys. I mean, I swear, with a push spreader and a backpack sprayer, you're in business. And the idea is, if you're treating someone's lawn, they shouldn't have that many weeds every year. Yes, they're going to have certain, broadleaf weeds that emerge, but on a good, healthy program, and if you've got a good, healthy stand of grass, you should have minimal weeds. So that's why I love pushing out my food, pushing the fertility, and spot spraying the weeds only when we have to. I don't like mixing several chemicals in a tank all at once. Some concentrates do not need to be applied with calibrated equipment. They're just diluted, loaded, and sprayed enough to cover thoroughly or applied to the point of runoff. And then most concentrates have to be diluted and applied with the calibrated equipment. Calibration is the process of measuring and adjusting the amount of pesticide your equipment applies or delivers to a specific point. And the benefits of calibration include safety, efficiency, and cost savings. And applying more or less than necessary is a waste of money. Now, I would love to, and one day I'm going to do this. I'm going to come up with some formulations that's going to show you how much money you can save by calibrating your equipment every single morning. Because I know people that are just like, I'm not paying my guys 15 minutes to calibrate that equipment every single morning. Well, that 15 minutes is saving you money. Yes, you're paying labor wages, but by the time you go out and you make several applications throughout the day with equipment that's out of calibration, how much money have you wasted? The calibration rate is affected by travel speed, particle and droplet size, and pressure or drop mechanism of the application equipment. First, make a trial run using water only. Measure how much time it takes to physically go over the area, and then measure how much water is sprayed from that amount of time, and use the measure of water to determine the amount of pesticide use. Now, which piece of equipment do we actually have to use the pesticide to calibrate? Like here, we're talking about just using water.
The push spreader.
The push spreader. We've actually got to use the chemical that we're going to use. And it always says to be on a surface very similar to what you're making the application. And it's not really the surface. We're talking about the slope. So if we're getting ready to go into a neighborhood where they've graded off the entire hillside and made everything flat, we need to calibrate our equipment on flat ground. If we're going into a neighborhood that's got some rolling hills in it, like a lot of ours do here, we need to find an area very similar to that and calibrate our equipment pushing up and down hills. But with calibration, we're going to have uniform release. We're going to measure the output from each nozzle or hopper available for your equipment to be sure that you're releasing the correct amount of pesticide, and it shouldn't be more or less than 10%. Method 1 is operate the equipment at standstill for a certain amount of time and measure the output in a container. Method 2, attach containers to each nozzle or hopper and then run the equipment over the intended use and then measure the output in the containers. With your test application, do an accurate measurement of amount in the tank, operate the equipment over the intended area at a constant speed, and then measure the amount needed to refill the tank back to the pre-application level. To figure your application rate, the amount dispersed divided by your distance covered is your application rate. With small sites and small equipment, it's what you're going to use. If applying the pesticide in small quantities, you can scale down and test using small amounts. However, if you've got larger sites and you're using larger equipment, you're going to have to use a much larger site and amount to calibrate. Here is just some basic math. We're going to kind of skip that so we can get to the fun part real quick. But, you know, we need to know high school geometry, guys, when calculating this stuff. But when we have a misapplication, keep an eye on the amounts you're actually applying for the load you calculated. And if something is off, you check your calculation and your equipment. You can catch and correct any errors before it's too late. Now, what is the number one reason we have a pesticide failure? We make an application and it just doesn't work. And we're like, oh my gosh. Rain. That affects it, but still not the number one reason we have a pesticide failure.
I think so.
Using the wrong pesticide.
True,
Okay.
Kelly. And why do we use the wrong pesticide? What does that usually stem from?
We didn't identify the pest properly to start with.
Correct. Incorrectly identifying the pest. We got to know our diseases. We got to know our bugs. We got to know what's happening. And that, my friends, takes a little bit of investigation. We've got to go and make these site visits. So let's look at a sample problem. And then we're going to look at a quick way to break this down. I know we got just a few more minutes in the 50-minute class, but how much would an application of Barricade 65 WDG water dispersible granulars cost for an 8,000 square foot home lawn if the labeled rate is 1 pound active ingredient and Barricade 65 WDG is $39.95 a pound? Now, I couldn't tell you exactly what it costs today because this PowerPoint was written way back when in the early 2000s. So we're not worried about that. We're worried about how to do the math. So how much would the application of a granular combination product cost for the same lawn at the same rate? So let's remember, we got an 8,000 square foot lawn. The label rate's 1 pound active ingredient per acre, and it costs us $39 or $40 a pound. So we know that information. We're going to start with what we have to get to what we want. And what we know we have is an 8,000 square foot lawn. But if we're using dry formulations, the number on the label refers to the percent active ingredient by weight. So example, Barricade 65 WDG is 65% by weight prodiamine. Therefore, 100 pounds of it contains 65 pounds of prodiamine. 1 pound will contain 0.65 pounds of the active ingredient. When using liquid, the number on the label refers to the pounds active ingredient per gallon of product. So we have Barricade 4FL has 4 pounds prodiamine active ingredient per 1 gallon. Therefore, a 2.5 gallon jug is going to contain 10 pounds. And so how do we get there? How do we come up with our sprayer spreader cost calculations? Through dimensional analysis. Start with what you have to get to what you want. So we can all figure this out, right? Because most of y'all, I see you turning it up. I mean, I'm watching you on the camera here. How much would 5 truckloads of beer cost when delivered to a convenience store if there's 1,000 20-ounce drinks per truck and they cost a nickel an ounce? We're going to set the problem up the exact same way we would pesticides. So we have truckloads. Remember, we're starting with what we have and trying to get to what we want. We know we have an 8,000 square foot lawn, just like we have 5 truckloads, and we're trying to get to the cost. So we cancel out everything. And so we set it up. 5 truckloads There's 1,000 beards per truckload. So these guys will actually cancel out. And let me get our pen. So truckloads cancel out. The beers cancel out. And guess what? Ounces cancel out. So we multiply 5 times 1,000 times 20 times 0.05 divided by the 1. And what does that give us? It costs $5,000 to deliver those 5 truckloads. So let's look at this for the lawn care program. We have our 8,000 square foot home lawn. We know it's 1 pound active ingredient, and we know our cost. We have the 8,000 and we want to get to the cost. So 8,000 square feet, there's 1 acre, is 43,560 square feet. So square feet cancels out. It's 1 pound active ingredient per acre. Barricade is 1 pound barricade per active ingredient. So again, canceling these guys out. The acre, I forgot, cancels out. It's $39.95 per pound of barricade. So the 1 pound barricade cancels out. So we multiply 8,000 times 1 times 1 times 1 times $39.95 gives us $319,600 divided by 43,560 times 1 times 0.65 times 1 is 28,314. Divide that into your top number, and we have $11.28. Therefore, sure.
I said sure.
Yes. It's actually cheaper now, ain't it? Right. But we know what the math is when we know what it cost us today. So yes, this number is going to be a lot more. But back in the day when Dr. Reynolds taught me how to do this, the 8,000 square foot home lawn would have cost us $11.28 in product cost. So still my favorite yard to master, but the 5,000 to 10,000 square foot lawn is the way to go. Now, why did we use an 8,000 square foot home lawn as an example? Well, back in the early 2000s, that was the average square foot of a home in the Raleigh area. So, but now if we know what it cost us per active ingredient, we can figure out exactly what our product cost is going to be per yard. Now that was for an 8,000 square foot home lawn. I want to take it down even to how much it cost me per 1,000 square feet. That way, when somebody calls and says, hey, how much can you do our yard for? I mean, I can get on Google Earth and trace that and get the exact square footage, and I can tell them, pretty quickly. I don't even have to do a site visit. And again, thanks to Dr. Reynolds, who's down at Texas A&M now. Super cool guy who come up with that, the dimensional analysis. So, any questions, comments, or concerns? Man, y'all were a quiet crowd tonight.
Tired. It's spring.
I know. Like, I'm exhausted already, and it's just starting.
I know.
That's the sad thing.
That's the pollen. That's the pollen.
Is it the pollen?
That's the pollen is whipping me too. And I don't know why my name is coming up Kelly Alley. That's crazy. I don't know why.
Oh, and what is your name?
Kevin.
Is Kelly your wife?
No, I don't. I have no idea.
Oh.
I typed it in. When I typed it in, it was red under there, and it said Kevin. And then I typed it in, and when I raise my hand or something, it comes up Kelly, and I have no idea.
I'm looking at the keyboard. No, man. Yeah, it couldn't have been a mistypo, unless it just like auto, corrects or whatever for you.
Yeah, when I typed in Kevin, it had red underneath there, and I went on and sent it. But I'm not savvy on this stuff anyway.
You had you had that cold beer before you jumped on, didn't you?
No, you see that mug I'm drinking? Can you see that mug?
No, your camera's off.
Oh, my camera's on? I don't even know how to put the camera on.
Susan usually has a glass of wine.
I do. I just...
No, I've got.
I thought I was being sneaky.
I've got.
That's what I keep
sorry.
in the Yeti here. Yeah. No.
I'm trying to figure out where the camera is. I was going to show you my mug here, what it had on, and I can't even find the
It
camera.
should be in
now.
the bottom left-hand corner of your screen.
There it is.
Yeah, because it says mute. It says mute for the microphone. It says stop video or start video on the left-hand corner.
There it is.
He's putting his britches on before he does it. You know, he's seen that
Yeah.
Zoom commercial. Everybody
There
working
you go.
from home on Zoom, they just put their shirt and tie on and they're still in their pajamas.
You see it?
pants.
Can you see it now?
No, sir.
You can't see it. I swear.
I see his face.
You
I
see?
don't
But you see?
I
You
see
see-
him, but it says Eric Jones under his face. I see him talking. It says Eric Jones. It's weird.
Yeah, I don't know why. I don't know why it's doing that. I was going to show you. I had a mug in here. I had one of my mugs I was drinking out of. One of my customers got me the other day. It said law enforcement officer. She found somewhere.
Oh, that's
Oh,
cute.
okay. No, you are the loan enforcer, right? Is that the name of your company?
No, mine's Alley Lawn Care.
Oh, okay. Because
Yeah.
who is it? The loan cop or something's on. They usually there's a guy that jumps on every so often. I think it's the loan cop or loan enforcement.
If you seen that, she found that mug somewhere. It said lawn enforcement officer with a
Oh.
lawnmower on it. She picked it up and had it tied to my truck. It's pretty neat.
Gotcha.
There's one that's called Loan and Order.
Yeah. And there's a mug at Cracker Barrel that says something like that too. That thing's like a huge coffee cup.
I think that's where she's got it. I think 'cause
Really?
it had the Cracker Barrel bags. I think that's where she got it. That's where this
Gotcha.
comes from.
Good deal. All right, guys. So what I'll do tonight, as soon as we hang up, I'll go ahead and type this in. You should see it on your license pretty quick. It's supposed to be an automated, updated system. They're still working out the quirks and stuff that's associated with it. But
Yeah,
Mike, loan
where was
enforcement.
where was the enforcement officer today? Greensboro was over here spraying like crazy with the winds blowing 25.
Jeez.
Oh,
I
it was
seen it
so
on-
windy here. There was like no way I could spray.
No, I was wanting to bad. Greensboro, the city of Greensboro, they had their guys over the sidewalks walking up backpack sprayers just like crazy. And I said, what are y'all doing?
Yeah.
Killing some
Unreal.
stuff that they're not trying to kill some stuff they didn't intend to.
Right.
If it was herbicide anyways.
And there's no way that they can't find them something else to do on a day like today.
Exactly.
So, all right, guys. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Like I said, I'll upload this. My contact, Mr. Weaver, has been promoted down at the Department of Ag. So I'm still getting to know the new person that helps me out with the classes by getting them approved and making sure the rosters are applied. So let me know if you don't see it in your license in the next, 2 days, but you should see it first thing in the morning. So, all righty.
All right.
All
Appreciate
right,
it.
guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Good
it.
night.
Talk to you soon. See
Thank
you
you.
guys. See you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Eric the Turf Teacher Jones. Oh, yeah! Teaching you life lessons, business strategies, and leadership.
Let's grow together.